This is Channel Name, where real-life inspired stories touch the heart and remind us of the goodness that still exists in this world. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us till the end, because today's story will move you in ways you never expected. It began on a cold, gray afternoon in a small, forgotten town on the outskirts of the city. The wind howled through the narrow streets, carrying dust and dry leaves that whispered against the cracked sidewalks. Officer Daniel Moore sat quietly in his patrol car, sipping the last bit of lukewarm coffee. He'd been on duty since dawn, responding to the usual calls, noise complaints, a small fender bender, and a missing pet. Nothing unusual, but something felt off that day. The sky was heavy, the air thick, and Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. As he drove past an old industrial area that had long been abandoned, something caught his eye. A flicker of movement near a collapsed fence. He slowed down. Most people avoided this place. It was a ghost zone, filled with decaying buildings, shattered windows, and broken memories of what used to be a factory lot. He parked the car, stepped out, and listened. At first, nothing but the sound of the wind. Then, there it was again. A faint, trembling sound. A whimper. Daniel followed the noise through the weeds and rusted metal, his boots crunching against broken glass. "Hello," he called out gently, his hand resting near his holster out of habit. "Is anyone there?" No answer. Only silence. Then he heard it again, this time closer. A small cry. Fragile, desperate. It was coming from behind a collapsed wooden crate. Daniel crouched and slowly moved the debris aside. What he saw froze him. A little girl, no older than 7, huddled against the wall. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Her clothes were torn and far too thin for the cold. She looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes, clutching a small stuffed bear missing one arm. "Hey there," Daniel said softly, kneeling down. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm a police officer." The girl didn't speak. She flinched when he reached out, pulling the bear tighter to her chest. Her lips were pale, trembling. Daniel noticed how weak she looked, her cheeks sunken, her arms trembling from exhaustion. "Are you hungry?" he asked quietly. She nodded faintly, almost afraid to admit it. Daniel quickly went back to his car and returned with a granola bar and a small bottle of water. She hesitated but took them with shaky hands, eating slowly, as if afraid someone might take it away. Watching her, Daniel felt something break inside him. He'd seen pain before. He'd seen victims, loss, tragedy. But this was different. There was something unbearably pure and heartbreaking about seeing a child fight to survive in silence. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl didn't answer. She only whispered, "Please don't send me back." Daniel frowned. "Back where, sweetheart?" She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "They'll hurt me again." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "No one's going to hurt you, okay? I promise. You're safe now." He wrapped his jacket around her and called for backup. But even as he spoke into his radio, he could hear the tremor in his own voice. Something about this felt bigger than a simple rescue. When the ambulance arrived, the girl refused to let go of his hand. Even when the paramedics gently tried to lift her onto the stretcher, she clung to Daniel's arm, whispering, "Don't leave me. I'm not going anywhere," he promised. At the hospital, doctors confirmed she was severely malnourished and dehydrated. But what disturbed them most were the bruises, some old, some new, marking her fragile body. Daniel stayed outside the room, pacing the hallway, his mind racing. Who could do this to a child? Later that night, after she had eaten and finally fallen asleep, a nurse came out and told him something that made his blood run cold. "She has scars," the nurse said softly. And she mentioned something about being locked in a basement. She wouldn't say more. Daniel felt a storm rise inside him. He'd seen enough cruelty in his years on the force, but nothing compared to this. He went back to her room and sat quietly beside her bed. The little girl stirred and whispered, "Will you stay till morning?" He smiled faintly. "As long as you need." By morning, Child Services had arrived to start their investigation. But Daniel wasn't ready to walk away. Something about the girl, her fear, her silence, told him there was more to this story. He started digging. He went back to the abandoned lot, searching the nearby area. He found traces of old food cans, a blanket, and what looked like a small shoe, hers, probably. But behind a rusted door of one of the warehouses, he found something else. An old, makeshift room. Dirty mattress, ropes, empty bottles, and a notebook. When he opened it, his stomach turned. It was filled with crude drawings and words like, "Be quiet, no crying," and, "The bad man comes at night." He immediately called his chief and requested a full investigation. Over the next few days, the truth began to unfold. The girl, whose name was Lily, had gone missing 8 months earlier from a neighboring city. Her mother had been searching for her tirelessly, distributing flyers, begging for any sign. Everyone assumed the worst, but Lily had been taken by a man who used the abandoned factory as his hideout. For months, she'd been trapped, beaten, starved, and silenced. Until she managed to escape through a broken vent and hide in the lot where Daniel found her. When her mother arrived at the hospital and saw her daughter for the first time, the room filled with cries that seemed to shake the walls. Daniel stepped outside, tears blurring his vision. He tried to hold it together, but he couldn't. That night, he drove back to the station and sat alone in his car. He thought about all the reports, the cases, the calls he'd answered without emotion. But now, he couldn't stop seeing Lily's eyes, the way they begged for safety, the way they lit up when she finally realized she was free. He broke down, not because he was weak, but because he was human. Because for the first time in a long time, he'd seen both the deepest darkness and the brightest light in one child's story. In the weeks that followed, Daniel visited Lily and her mother often. She started talking more, smiling more. She even began drawing again. This time, pictures of the sun, trees, and a man in a blue uniform with kind eyes. One day, as he walked into her hospital room, she handed him a small paper. On it, she had drawn a heart. Inside it, she wrote in shaky letters, "My hero." Daniel choked up, unable to speak. He just hugged her gently, making sure not to scare her. "You saved me," she whispered. He shook his head, smiling through tears. "No, Lily, you saved yourself. I just helped you find the way." The suspect was eventually caught, a drifter with a long history of crimes. Justice was served, but for Daniel, the real victory was seeing Lily laugh again. Months later, during a small community event honoring officers for bravery, Daniel was called on stage. He didn't expect it. The mayor praised his courage and compassion, presenting him with a medal. But the moment that mattered most wasn't the applause. It was when he looked down from the stage and saw Lily sitting in the front row, holding her mother's hand, smiling proudly at him. That smile was worth more than any medal. After the ceremony, Lily ran up to him and said, "I'm not afraid anymore." Daniel crouched down to her level. "Good. Because you're one of the bravest people I've ever met." She grinned and whispered, "When I grow up, I want to help people too. Like you." And in that instant, Daniel realized something he'd forgotten over years of wearing the badge, that real policing isn't about authority, it's about humanity. It's about showing up when no one else does. He went home that night, placed the medal on his shelf, and stared out the window at the quiet street. Somewhere, he knew, there were still children like Lily, alone, afraid, and unseen. And he vowed to keep looking for them, to never stop listening to that small voice that whispers when something feels wrong. Because sometimes, that whisper leads you to a miracle. Years passed, and Lily's life transformed. With therapy, love, and her mother's unwavering strength, she healed. She grew into a bright, compassionate teenager who loved drawing and writing stories about heroes, not superheroes but real ones. People who showed kindness when no one was watching. One afternoon, Daniel received a letter in the mail. No return address, just his name on the envelope. Inside was a drawing, a familiar one. It showed a police officer kneeling beside a little girl in an abandoned lot, sunlight breaking through the clouds above them. Beneath it, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for finding me." Daniel smiled, his eyes wet again. He framed the drawing and placed it right above his desk at the station. Every time he looked at it, he was reminded of that day, the day he listened to a cry in the wind, followed his instinct, and changed a life forever. He often told young officers who joined the force, "You won't always find criminals. Sometimes, you'll find broken souls. And if you can help even one of them heal, that's the kind of badge you should be proud of." The story of Officer Daniel Moore and little Lily spread quietly through the community. Not through the news, but through whispers, parents telling their children that good people still exist. That even in a broken world, compassion can still shine like a beacon. And that's exactly what Daniel became, a quiet beacon of hope. Sometimes, late at night, he'd drive by the old abandoned lot. It had been cleared now, turned into a small park. Children played there, laughter echoing through the open air. He'd sit in his car, watching them, remembering the day it all began. He never told anyone that, once in a while, when the wind blew just right, he thought he could still hear a faint voice, small, sweet, and strong, saying, "Thank you." This is Channel Name, and this story reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they wear a badge, carry a heart full of empathy, and follow a whisper into the unknown.